2025 is going to be quite an amazing year because the outer planets, they're all moving out of one set of signs and simultaneously moving into another set of signs. And the way they're doing this, the exactness of it, it actually hasn't happened for hundreds of years. So it's the beginning of a lot of things, and it's the ending of a lot of other things. So what's happening in 2025? There's a lot of things. For example, there's the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. They're both moving into Aries. And Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, they take place every 35 years approximately. Every time they take place, there's some kind of process that happens in Russia. So I think that 2025-26 is going to be a time of dissolution of the political system established by Putin in Russia. You know, going back, the last time it was the dissolution of the Berlin Wall. Time before that it was death of Stalin. Time before that was the Russian Revolution. Time before that was the assassination of the Russian Tsar. So it's quite likely that there's a major restructuring happening in Russia. So the reason that 2025 is such a huge year is that all the major planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, they change sign. Now Jupiter changes sign once a year, but this change of Saturn, Uranus and Neptune and Pluto simultaneously basically moving into new signs and therefore aspecting each other. This is a major change, and it means that individuals, society and governments are going to be more proactive and more aggressive. And it's going to be destabilizing because, it's not a passive situation anymore. There's people making active changes. We'll be going into this in detail later, but Neptune moves into Aries at the end of March, Saturn into Aries at the end of May. So that's the beginning of some troubles for Russia. And then November 2024, Pluto for the fifth and last time moved into Aquarius. It's going to be there until 2024. And in July, Uranus moves into Gemini after 7 years in Taurus. And it's going to harmonize with Pluto. It's an amazing series of about 6 trines to Pluto, which is going to be brilliant for electrical, technological batteries, technological revolution, really. AI, of course. So everyone's going to be affected by these planetary movements. So let's look at them in a little bit more detail. So the diagram on the right shows these planetary cycles. You can see Pluto's 248 years, Saturn's 30 years, Neptune's 165 years, Uranus is 84 years. So you can imagine that this simultaneous change from one side to another is like extraordinarily calibrated, you could say. And the big thing about this is that the planets are all, these outer planets are all moving from feminine signs or passive signs or negative signs, the words I don't really describe what they do, into positive signs or masculine signs, and it's a different kind of energy. So the energy in the feminine signs is like more receptive, more caring, more sensitive, more solidaric. And as soon as this movement goes into masculine signs, then individuals become more important, and this kind of there's a desire to take action. You can see that with Trump. He's come to power, and he's like taking all kinds of actions because this is in the air now. It's time to be proactive, not passive anymore. And I guess that's what the Republicans in America they read that, or they intuitively figured that, and the Democrats didn't. So what we're going to see in this coming period is this dramatic technological advance. The electrification of infrastructure. That means, electric cars totally taking over the next 5 years. AI and the repercussions AI is going to have for all kinds of working situations is going to be dramatic. And different new energy forms, basically fusion energy probably is going to be the big one. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at Pluto in Aquarius, because Pluto kind of went into Aquarius. I think it sort of, you can see it here, it sort of came into Aquarius in 2023. And you can see that on the graph. It came in 2023, it went quickly out again, so it just dipped its toe into Aquarius. And then finally in 2024, it came in again in early 2024, and around the American election it went back into Capricorn. And then in November or December last 2024, Pluto finally came into Aquarius, and that's it. Pluto's going to be in Aquarius now until 2044. And you can see on this graph that it kind of coincides with the position of Pluto in USA's horoscope, because Pluto is at 27 degrees Capricorn. So what's happened is that Pluto's returned to its position in the American horoscope, and it's triggered all the stuff in America's horoscope, which is America's got Pluto in the second house opposite Mercury in Cancer, and that's a kind of conspiratorial combination. So the whole idea of deep state conspiracy theories is totally dominating with this Pluto return in America's horoscope. And that's been in this interim period of the Biden administration. But now, with the Trump administration, we're getting Pluto in Aquarius. And you can see, actually, if you look at China's horoscope, China's got the moon at 3 Aquarius. So in 2025, Pluto will be going over China's moon. And in 2026, it'll be going over China's ascendant. So we can expect pretty dramatic changes in China. It might not be like unseating President Xi, but I think the population is going to get a little bit upset. It's called the People's Republic of China, so it belongs to the people, and the moon is the people. So Pluto on the moon is going to make the people want some changes, and Pluto is kind of initially kind of repressive in the way it kind of works. So the whole kind of surveillance system of the people in China, it might kind of get more extreme, if it can get any more extreme. And there might be sort of repercussions because of that. But I think that basically, because China's got a lot of planets in Libra trine the moon and the ascendant, and this there's going to be this Pluto Uranus trine. I think the technological advances in China is going to blow us away over the next few years. Okay, so Pluto enters Aquarius, and this is what's happening. This is the picture of the Poor People's Army, and I like what they're writing. They're saying, we're not the left, we're not the right, we're the bottom, and we're coming for the top. That is Pluto in Aquarius, because Pluto in Aquarius has a leveling effect, and it wants to drag down elitism and level up. That's like what it wants to do. You could say it's got 20 years to do this, but this is the kind of initial thing. And you might not like Trump, but what he's done is harnessed this anger that exists in America, because for the last 40 years, the rich have constantly got much, much richer, and the poor have all got poorer. And in the Midwest, there's like so much poverty and addiction. People have got 2 jobs, and they still can't get by. The families have got addicted to these, drugs that have been pushed basically by American pharmaceutical companies. So I can understand, that they don't want to hear anything. I mean, the people who voted MAGA Republicans, they don't want to hear all the enlightened talk from people who've been going to college on the West and the East Coast, and doing fine. So obviously also, people are sensitive to immigration and globalization, and they're looking for anything to blame for their current situation. And the situation is almost certainly going to get even more extreme in America because of the effect of AI. So it's not just the poor that's going to get poorer, but it's going to destabilize a lot of middle class jobs. Now, if you go back 247 years, which is the last time Pluto entered Aquarius, and that was just after the Declaration of Independence in America. Between the Declaration of Independence in America and then the final expulsion of the British from America, Pluto was moving from Capricorn into Aquarius, just like it is now. But in France, this was the beginning of the French Revolution. And what was interesting about the French Revolution, you could say, was the fact that the French aristocracy, the royal family, they were squandering wealth, like they were just living a life of luxury, and people were starving. So there was a revolution, and it kind of escalated over the years until about 15,000 French aristocracy were executed on the guillotine, and including the Louis XVI and his Marie Antoinette, his wife, and this was a kind of, this was the entertainment of the period. And there was these old ladies knitting and watching it. It was, these revolutionaries were called sans-culottes, which means really not wearing fancy clothes, and all the aristocracy, they kept a real low profile because basically they were getting, the estates were getting taken over by peasants, and they were getting executed and killed. So the principles of the French Revolution was liberty, equality, and brotherhood. Aquarius, right? But the violence of this period was extraordinary. Now, it's not going to happen in the 2020s. It's a different situation. At the time of the Reign of Terror and the execution of the king in France, Pluto, I think, was opposite Uranus, and I think it was a grand cross with Saturn and Mars, maybe on the day the king was executed. So it was a extreme situation. That was the Reign of Terror. It was the Uranus-Pluto opposition. This time we've got a Uranus-Pluto trine. It's going to be a little bit more peaceful. So let's have a quick look at Neptune and Aries. Well, yeah, it's really difficult to know how this is going to work, because Neptune's been in Pisces, which is said to rule, right? And now it's going to Aries. In Pisces, it's awakened a lot of compassion. It's awakened, sensitivity. In a way, sorry to say this, but Neptune in Pisces has been woke, right? It's concern for everybody. Concern for LGBT, concern for immigrants, etc., etc. With Saturn in Pisces also, trying to help underprivileged or people suffering in society. This is going to change when Neptune goes into Aries. Now, this is a map of, this graph shows kind of, you can't quite see it actually, in the early, it's not showing the first month of 2025 when Neptune actually and Saturn enter Aries. But you can see the conjunction in July 2025, this orange dot, the first one, that's the first conjunction of, well, it's actually not exact, it's nearly exact, a conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. Then they both go back into Pisces. So from September 2025 to February 2026, Saturn and Neptune are back in Pisces, which is pretty much going to show a kind of, a reversal of the initiatives that Saturn and Neptune wanted to take in Aries in 2025. But in February, March 2026, Saturn and Neptune conjoin at 1 degree Aries, and that's it. That's the one and only conjunction, really. Normally there's about 3, but that'll set a lot of things in motion. So what didn't kind of work out for people, politicians, etc., in 2025 is really gonna get traction in 2026. Whether that's going to be good or not, that's another question, because Saturn's said to be in fall in Aries. It's like initiatives which fail, and Neptune combined with Saturn tends to dissolve initiatives, right? So it might not be very effective, the initiatives that are taken, but because Saturn and Neptune are actually going into Aries, back into Pisces, into Aries, they're crossing a border, and Neptune dissolves borders. Saturn tries to make borders, so Saturn's like a wall and Neptune's like a tsunami, So there's going to be a real attempts to do something about immigration in America. That's what Trump's working on right now, right? And if you follow this a little bit, you can see also, this Pluto sextile Neptune is going on and on and on. It lasts 100 years, but it's exact again in 2026. Okay, so the last time Neptune came into Aries was 165 years ago, and that was actually about almost exactly on the date of the Civil War. The Civil War in America started on the 12th of April. Neptune entered Aries on the 14th. You might think that's got something to do with war then, but I don't think it is to do with war. I think it's to do with a unification need. So Neptune brings dissolution and unification. So it was a fighting for the rights, human rights, against slavery. Actually, in the rest of the world, slavery was being banned most places at this time. So the southern states of America, it was an economic situation. They had all these slaves. They didn't want to ban slavery because their economy depended on it. But the northern states, they obviously wanted to adopt an anti-slavery position. And so that's partly Neptune. Neptune, now they're going to fight. Neptune goes into Aries. Now they're going to fight for the ideals, that they believe in. And because the southern states wanted to secede, so they could keep their slaves, right? The dissolution of the states wasn't desired. The energy was for the unification. But of course, it was a terrible period of suffering. And actually, a lot of people died of dysentery. 400,000 people died of dysentery in the American Civil War. So it was like, it was a real tragic time for America. If you look around the world, actually, there was a even more dramatic dissolution period in China. And it was a long period, though, in the mid 1800s, but about 20 or 30 million people died, in this conflict between the Qing dynasty and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, which sounds a bit Neptunian, doesn't it? Anyway, it was kind of resolved as Neptune entered Aries because of the Heavenly Kingdom lost a major engagement, in 1861 when Neptune entered Aries. So it took some while for it to stabilize in China, but things were happening all over the world as Neptune entered Aries. In Italy, for example, this was Italy had just been made up of all these different states, like Lombardy and Venice and Sicily and Sardinia and all that. Under the leadership of King Emmanuel II, it was unified, and the unification, or it declared independence, Italy, from Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1861, and that was like the beginning of the end of this huge Austro-Hungarian Empire, which finally dissolved with the First World War. So Italy became independent. So this is the independence year for Italy, with Neptune entering Aries. So if we look at what's happening in 2025, it's going to be, obviously, you can feel it already. This talk is being given in late January 2025. Trump's just been inaugurated, and I think a lot of things are going to be happening in America because of that. You can see it already with his executive orders and all that. And if you look at this extraordinary period in February, March, April, May, which is at the time when Neptune's about to enter Aries, and Saturn also, you can see that there's a solar eclipse, and it's a partial eclipse, but it kind of hits the east coast of America, so it might kind of be relevant for Washington, D.C. And it pretty much, the eclipse takes place as Neptune enters Aries and Mercury's retrograde, leaving Aries, about to conjoin Neptune. So it looks like chaotic in many ways. In fact, I really don't really know what's going on here, because you can see that there's a node, the nodal axis, the north node has gone into Pisces, and therefore it's conjoined Neptune in Pisces, and Venus conjoins Neptune in Pisces. The Sun had just conjoined Neptune. Mercury's going to conjoin Neptune in Pisces. So, and in fact, Venus and Mercury go retrograde and direct 3 times, conjoining Neptune in Pisces with the North Node. What's that? And it sounds like, it doesn't sound very Trumpian. It sounds like about compassion, love and compassion. It sounds like there's a kind of backlash at this point against unfeeling political moves, and a sort of a surge of concern for immigrants, the suffering of people, and not just immigrants, but I think the North Node in Pisces is going to make us very much more aware of climate things and the ocean and that kind of stuff, so I think there's going to be a huge emphasis, but a temporary emphasis on, woke ideas and everything to do with compassion. How long that'll last, I don't think it will last, basically, because as Saturn and Neptune move into Aries, there's going to be a crueler approach, like move fast and break things approach. So this is a little bit like more accurate, zooming in on this extraordinary period from February to May this year, 2025, where Saturn enters Aries at the end of this period, and Neptune enters Aries at the beginning of April. But you can see these curving lines. One is the blue one is Venus, and the purple one is Mercury. You can see as they curve, they go retrograde. They join forces, go retrograde around 10 degrees Aries, and then go back into Pisces. So that when they go back into Pisces, they conjoin again, and they conjoin Saturn, or Venus in particular has a long conjunction with Saturn during the month of April, and then they kind of enter Aries again. And the solar eclipse is at 9 degrees Aries, so this is like having some kind of, it's like a huge transition effect. And you can see it a little bit more in detail here, where I've kind of activated it. And Venus has come into Aries in February the 5th, and then you can see Mercury coming through Pisces, and then Venus reaches 10 degrees and goes stationary retrograde, just as Mercury conjoins Neptune and the North Node, and then Mercury goes on into Aries, conjoins Venus, then Mercury goes retrograde, and then tries to catch up with Venus retrograde. So they're both going backwards in Aries, just as the Sun and Neptune conjoin and the last degree of Pisces. So there's this massive transition taking place. And then Venus conjoins Neptune again. Mercury is going back into Pisces, and then Neptune's now entered Aries, and it'll go back into Pisces later on in the year. And now comes Mercury into Aries, and there's this massive conjunction of Venus, Saturn, and the North Node. That sounds like a picture of suffering, doesn't it? And then finally Venus comes into Aries again, and now it's all Aries. Saturn's thinking about coming into Aries, and during the course of May, you see Saturn now entering Aries and about to make a conjunction with Neptune. So that's this weird period between February and May, and there's going to be a whole lot of things happening, but a lot of it's going to be a little bit tragic because of the emphasis on Pisces. It can be so many things, but if you're looking at America, it's going to be the wall, and obviously, poor old Biden, you can't build a wall with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces, building walls, it doesn't work, does it? But you can, when Saturn comes into Aries, definitely you're going to start building that wall. And as Saturn and Neptune conjoin in Aries, there will be this quite brutal expulsion of illegal immigrants, of which there are over 10 million in America. I don't think it'll be very successful, really, because the American economy depends a lot on immigrants. But there's going to be a big show, and so immigrants are quite likely to be illegal immigrants are likely to be imprisoned in camps, Saturn, Neptune in Aries, before being thrown back to their original countries, like that's going over the border from Pisces to Aries. So there's this kind of trying to get immigrants from one country to another, and the whole idea that there's probably going to be legal battles especially in July when Jupiter comes into Cancer square Saturn and Neptune. So, you know, it's not going to be that easy. But the basic move is expelling illegal immigrants. I mean, I think that's going to be very difficult to prevent. I mean, if you want to prevent it, and most people today, they don't want to prevent it. Most people are thinking, yeah, there's too many illegal immigrants, you know, what are they doing? Let's get them back. And you can see in America's horoscope that their fourth house, the home or the nation, the fourth house is at 0 degrees Aries. So Saturn and Neptune conjunction falls exactly on the fourth house of the American horoscope. You know, that also shows this period of population dispersal, suffering, and you know, undermining, really. You know, it's in a way it's an undermining of the principle of America or the USA, because, you know, it's full. They came, every American came as immigrants, and you know, they pretty much ethnically cleansed the Indian population, you know, the native Indian population, and, you know, imported black people from Africa to work. You know, so. I mean, America doesn't have a very good history with Neptune. And Mars and Neptune are square in the USA chart, so there's always this kind of, you know, white man speaks with forked tongue. Mars in Gemini, square Neptune. You know, it's a kind of, yeah. Yeah, there's so much stuff in Mars Neptune in America, because they also idealize weapons. You know, even the great films, all the good films, in the end they're always finding some massive armory of, you know, huge rifles and that kind of thing. You know, that's like, oh, that's the ultimate turn on in America, weapons. Okay, so yeah. You can't build a wall with Saturn, Neptune and Pisces, but you can make a damn good attempt when Saturn goes into Aries. So, cruel treatment of immigrants, or, if you want to look at it the other way, finally, you know, preventing the stream of immigrants from South America coming into America. Yeah. There's another thing actually with Saturn and Neptune, because I remember in 1989, it was the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn, and there was these scientists, Pons and Fleischmann or something, who made fusion. They made fusion, cold fusion. It was called, because they made it in the laboratory, and for months, you know, the scientific world was upended by this. Wow, we can now make cold fusion, and it all turned out to be an illusion, which was very Saturn-Neptune. But now Saturn and Neptune going to Aries, I think there is going to be the ability to create power stations made, you know, which use the principles of fusion, and that there's an incredible amount of investment, not least in China. And this picture is a picture of a facility in eastern China, which is going to be completed in 2025. China is going to do it. You know, yeah, and the principle of fusion is that it doesn't create radioactivity. It's you know, it has no waste products. It produces vast amounts of energy, just like the sun. It's just really, really difficult to do. Okay, so Uranus in Gemini, trouble. So the last time, well. We can see here, this is Uranus entering Gemini. And now you can see the trine with Pluto, which they kind of touch each other in 2025. That's going to be exciting, around about end of September or something like that. And then they really kick in, right? And because of the relative speeds, they actually make these trines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, maybe 6. So so that's a tremendous, extraordinary combination of Uranus and Pluto. That's a cycle that varies a little bit because of the speed of Pluto varies. Sometimes it's closer to Earth, sometimes further, so normally it's between 110 and 144 years that they conjoin, and the last conjunction was in the mid-60s. So this trine is the first kind of really harmonious expression of Uranus-Pluto influence. Now, Uranus-Pluto influence isn't kind of human. It's really good for machines, robots, automation. Anything where you take the human element out, or the human element is replaced by, that's like Uranus-Pluto, replaced by, the machine or the alien force. So it's going to be great for electric vehicles, no doubt about that. But anything, all these technological improvements are going to be vast. Now, I've drawn in here America's Uranus, which is at 8 degrees Gemini. So this is pretty much going to activate it, especially in early 2028. And that's a little bit worrying because, but not necessarily technologically. You've got things like Neuralink. That's Elon Musk's idea that you can implant something in the brain, right? You might not like this, but I think that Neuralink and that kind of idea, where you've got a kind of interface between data and the human mind, I think that's going to be a big thing with the Uranus-Pluto trine and with Pluto in Aquarius, generally speaking. So ultimately we're going to have a situation where you're not going to be looking up stuff on your iPhone. You're going to be automatically accessing all the information you ever need, and that's going to make a big difference for the human race. So it's unimaginable, really. But if we go back to the last time Uranus was in Gemini, because Gemini's air sign, so Uranus loves air signs, and like this picture shows the kind of things that were delivered 84 years ago, which was mostly bombs in the Second World War. It was a revolutionary warfare because of aerial warfare, and then cities were bombed to destruction. A more benign influence maybe in 2025 is drones. Well, obviously drones has also revolutionized warfare, but maybe we're going to see Uranus-Pluto trine, battery-driven drones delivering stuff, the air full of these drones. I wouldn't be surprised, at least. So it's drone time as Uranus comes into Gemini. But as I was going to say, Uranus in Gemini is a little bit worrying for America. If you look at Trump's horoscope, you see he's born with this lunar eclipse. You can see the sun's in Gemini, conjoining Uranus and opposite the moon on the nodal axis. That means there's an eclipse, and so the moon was eclipsed, just hours after Trump's birth, and it was one of these blood moons, where it's slightly red, which is a story in itself because Trump's got a thing about that. So he's a Uranus character. Everybody knows that. Unpredictable, bit of a genius, really. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got to where he is. He says he's a stable genius. So I would maybe contest that, but anyway, he won the last election with Uranus exactly on the MC. Maybe we should all seen that, but he could have gone to jail. Who would have known what's going to happen with Uranus on the MC? But it's and that means he's what I would call disruptor in chief. He's come to create disruption. That's what people voted him in for. They want to see things broken because they're just fed up with the kind of what people see as stagnation or whatever in the American government. So rather break things up than things continue as they are. And who better to do that than Uranus on than the guy with the Sun Uranus conjunction with Uranus conjoining his MC. So there's lots of things with Trump's horoscope. I won't go into them now. Pluto's in the 12th house. It's at the midpoint of Saturn Mars. That's an autocratic signature, hidden autocrat, right? But he's a lucky guy. He's always lucky. It's silly to make a court case against Trump. Look at that. He's got Jupiter in the second, trine Uranus. That's like, things always turn out in his favor. And maybe also the fact that Jupiter is in Libra and Venus, which looked really in trouble, conjoining Saturn in Cancer. But maybe the reception, Venus rules Libra and Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, so maybe the reception gets him out of the unpopularity you might expect with Venus Saturn. Anyway, and then of course he's got Mercury ruling all the Gemini influences, Mercury square Neptune. I mean, this guy, whenever he opens his mouth, it's always a kind of untruth in one way or another. And that's why it makes it kind of ironical. He started a social media company called Truth Social. Can you imagine that? Mercury in Cancer square Neptune, Truth Social. Okay. So this is the thing. I haven't written it on this chart, but the progressed MC of the US Sibley chart from the 4th of July 1776 has gone all the way around the horoscope and is now the progressed MC is like at 7 to 8 degrees Gemini. In fact, progressed MC conjoined progressed Uranus in the American chart at the election of Trump. We should have known, right? But now the progressed IC in 2026 is going to come on Uranus. Imagine that. The IC progress, after years of wandering through these signs, is now going to hit a planet, and it's going to be Uranus, and it's going to hit Uranus at the time of it transiting Uranus return. This undoubtedly shows a long period in the Trump administration in America of disruption. Some people might say it's like civil war, right? Yeah, I don't think the time is ripe for that. I think America is just a little bit too civilized these days. But the disruption. And the disruption on the work scene because of Uranus in Gemini in the 6th is going to be phenomenal, right? And that's going to create a lot of social unrest and a lot of disturbances, which is like the advantages that the Republicans maybe hope to make by disrupting the situation in America and trying something new. It's likely to be subverted by the actual disruption that's going to take place amongst ordinary people. So I think you have to reserve judgment about what's going to happen in America for about 3 years, and then by about 2027, 28, I think it'll all have got out of hand. Which would have been the function of Trump. Trump came to power because America needs to go through a Uranian period of disruption. So that's just some ideas about what's going to happen in 2025 and beyond, with a big focus on America. There's, of course, huge things happening in the Middle East and Russia. but maybe that's going to be part of another talk. So thanks for hanging on in there, and enjoy your astrology and enjoy 2025. Thanks.